The sound did not come first from the sky. It came from the ground. A deep tremor, almost organic, as if the earth itself were trying to warn that something irreversible had begun. Before the sirens, before the visible explosions, there was that heavy silence that always precedes catastrophe. It was September 1939, and Europe was already struggling to breathe, unaware that for years that air would be mixed with smoke, blood, and fear. Borders, once imaginary lines on diplomatic maps, became open wounds. The war did not ask permission. It simply entered. Tanks rolled into Poland at dawn, slicing through fields still wet with morning dew. Young soldiers, many barely old enough to shave, watched villages slide past like shadows through narrow vision slits. Some believed they were making history. Others were simply obeying orders. The sky hung low and gray, almost complicit. Homes burned too quickly. Churches collapsed as if they had always been fragile. Within weeks, an entire nation was crushed between two forces speaking different languages, yet sharing the same disregard for human fragility. The world watched, frozen, trying to convince itself that this was not yet the end of everything. But war is hungry, and once it begins, it is never satisfied with little. In London, Paris, Berlin, Rome, Moscow, men in dark suits with tired eyes spent sleepless nights in closed rooms lit by weak lamps, making decisions they would never have to carry out with their own hands. Maps lay stretched across tables like open bodies. Arrows advanced, retreated, collided. Each line represented thousands of lives that would never know the face of the men who moved them. Still, the decisions were made with almost clinical calm. Because from a distance, death feels abstract. Winter arrived early in Northern Europe, bringing with it fear from the sky. Air raid sirens tore through the night like metallic screams. In London, children ran into underground shelters, clutching dolls and blankets. The smell of damp concrete mixed with sweat and panic. Above them, German bombs fell without distinguishing factories from homes, soldiers from civilians. The city extinguished its lights to avoid being seen, sinking into a darkness so thick it seemed to swallow thought itself. And yet there was resistance. A shared cup of hot tea in the shelter, a radio playing softly, a song whispered just loud enough to remind everyone that life still existed. On the continent, armies moved with a speed never seen before. France, confident in concrete walls and memories of the previous war, was pierced like paper. German soldiers marched through Paris as cafes closed in haste and flags vanished from windows. Some Parisians watched in silence. Others cried. Others pretended nothing was happening, as if ignoring reality were a form of resistance. The sound of boots echoed down wide streets, carrying with it the sense that an entire era was being shoved out of place. But war does not settle for quick victories. It deepens. In the East, the conflict took on a different texture. The Soviet Union, initially a wary partner, became a target. When German troops pushed beyond imagined lines, they encountered not only soldiers, but distance, winter, and a population already familiar with hunger. Leningrad was encircled like a trapped animal. Roads closed, food vanished, cold seeped through the walls. People burned furniture to warm a single room. The sound of artillery became part of daily life, like a clock marking hours in a macabre rhythm. And still, concerts were held. Musicians played with fingers barely strong enough to move, because stopping meant accepting death ahead of schedule. In Stalingrad, the war reached a breaking point. There was no clear front anymore, only ruins fought over meter by meter. Buildings without walls became improvised fortresses. The air smelled of dust, gunpowder, and burned flesh. Soldiers slept for minutes, woke to gunfire, advanced through corridors already captured, and lost dozens of times. Cold froze weapons, fingers, thoughts. Fear was constant, but something stronger remained: refusal. Here, war stopped being movement and became obsession. When the encirclement closed, it was not just an army that was defeated, but the illusion of invincibility. Far from the frozen steppes, the Pacific burned. The attack on Pearl Harbor ripped open the Hawaiian sky on a quiet Sunday morning. Aircraft appeared like sudden shadows, and within minutes, ships burned like floating torches. The noise was overwhelming, chaos absolute. Sailors plunged into oil-covered water and debris. Many never resurfaced. That moment pulled a new force into the conflict, one that had not yet felt war fully on its own soil, but now carried the fury of shock and loss. Islands that had once been nearly invisible dots on maps became contested hellscapes. In the jungle, heat suffocated, humidity rotted everything, and the enemy could be only feet away, unseen. Hand-to-hand combat, sleepless nights, diseases that killed as effectively as bullets. The ocean, vast and indifferent, swallowed ships in silence. In the air, battles unfolded in seconds, lives ending in spirals of smoke. The war in the Pacific had a different rhythm, but the same essence: total human exhaustion. In occupied Europe, resistance grew in the shadows. Messages passed on scraps of paper. Clandestine radios whispered forbidden news. Sabotage struck at night, fast and precise. For every act of defiance came brutal retaliation. Public executions, villages burned, families erased. And yet, the flame refused to die. There was something deeply human in that insistence to fight even when victory felt too distant to imagine. Away from the front lines, another kind of horror unfolded. Trains arrived full and departed empty. The air carried a sweet, unbearable smell. People were reduced to numbers, names erased, stories cut short. Here, war revealed its naked face, the systematic attempt to deny the humanity of others. Guards followed orders. Prisoners clung to memories, to a name, a loved face, anything that proved they were still people. The world would only understand the depth of this abyss when it was far too late to save millions. As the years dragged on, the war consumed everything. Entire economies were reshaped to produce destruction. Cities became factories. Factories became targets. Strategic bombing turned whole neighborhoods into ash. The night sky glowed orange and red, as if the horizon itself were on fire. Civilians ran through rubble searching for water, food, family. The silence after a night of bombing was almost worse than the noise, because it revealed what had been lost. But the axis of the war began to turn. In the west, Allied forces crossed the English Channel under heavy skies, boats packed with men who knew many would not return. The beaches became killing fields. Machine gun fire mixed with crashing waves. Bodies fell into the water. Others advanced anyway, driven not only by orders, but by the belief that their sacrifice might shorten the nightmare. Every meter gained came at a terrible price. But the tide had shifted. From there, the war pushed back toward where it had begun. German cities felt the weight of siege, fire from the sky, and approaching defeat. Civilians who once believed in promises of glory now searched for shelter among ruins. The constant sound of aircraft became a signal of loss. In the east, the Red Army advanced like an unstoppable force, driving the enemy back across devastated land. The path was marked by destroyed villages, interrupted lives, and a collective exhaustion that seemed bottomless. Berlin, in the end, became an echo of everything the war had been. Streets turned into labyrinths of debris, buildings without roofs, without walls, without pasts. Artillery thundered endlessly, too close to ignore. Civilians hid in basements, listening as the world collapsed above them. Soldiers, many barely more than boys, defended blocks that no longer held strategic value, only symbolic meaning. When silence finally came, there was no immediate celebration. Only a heavy emptiness, difficult to comprehend. In the Pacific, the war ended abruptly and terrifyingly. A light brighter than the sun appeared on the horizon. The shock followed. Then a wind that tore everything from its place. Cities vanished in moments. People became shadows burned into walls. The silence afterward was not peace, but disbelief. The world struggling to understand that a boundary had been crossed that could never be undone. Surrender followed, and with it, the formal end of the conflict, but not the end of its consequences. When the weapons fell silent, what remained was not relief, but mourning. Millions dead, cities in ruins, families without answers. The smell of smoke lingered in the air. Soldiers returned home changed, carrying silences words could not reach. Civilians tried to rebuild routines on ground still hiding shrapnel beneath the soil. The world had survived, but it was no longer the same. The Second World War was not merely a sequence of battles and dates. It was a brutal mirror of humanity's capacity to create and to destroy, to obey and to resist, to lose everything and still attempt to begin again. In every rebuilt street, in every silent memorial, there is a reminder that civilization is fragile, and that forgetting this truth is always paid for in lives. When the last shot echoed and snow began to cover the ruins, there was no true ending, only the certainty that history could never again be told the same way.